Hi, I'm Professor Rodrigo Praino, Director of the Jeff Bleich Centre for Democracy and Disruptive Technologies here at Flinders University. And we're very glad to be here today with Senator Karen Grogan from the Labour Party. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming here. Senator Grogan, to start, disinformation and misinformation seem to be a very important topic these days.
Critical. I think we've seen such a shift in the material that we're seeing online and proliferated, and much of it not actually being based in fact. Some of this, as we know, is from bad actors, and some is just people perpetuating things they hear without understanding the factual basis. One of the things that really contributes to that, obviously, is the algorithms we have on social media, where we're just seeing information being pumped at people to reinforce something they might have reposted or said online, and it starts to make its own fact. And this can be hugely problematic across our whole society.
Absolutely. And as you know, we are trying to do a lot here in terms of research, understanding, the effects of disinformation to democracy, the effects of disinformation in the electoral system. In your opinion, what can government do? What should government do about this?
In the previous role of government, we tried very hard to bring in some legislation on mis and disinformation. Essentially what we had done was taken what had been a voluntary code, which had been put together alongside the platforms, but the analysis had shown that they weren't following it. We essentially put it into a piece of legislation so that they would have to follow those rules and they would have to be able to verify what was going on. Unfortunately, it was not supported by the other parties and we ended up having to pull it, which was really quite problematic. So here we are without any regulation for the platforms around mis and disinformation and without any structure in which to hold people to account.
We have identified three different types, at least, of disinformation, right? There's disinformation that comes from the public, so people who believe things and they just start talking about it online. Disinformation that comes from people running for office or from interest groups that are organized and have some sort of agenda around it. And disinformation coming from foreign agents trying to mingle with electoral results in democracies. Do you think there's one that is more serious than the other? Do we have to look at all three together? What's your opinion about that?
I think we have to look at all three, but I do think some are more important than others. I think where you've got a total bad actor aiming to influence the democracy of this country, then I think we have to be swift and summary in how we deal with that, because that undermines our entire society. It threatens our democracy and can be extraordinarily dangerous. Anything out there that's lying to the public, giving people false impression for bad purpose, I think is highly dangerous. One of the key things that was thrown at this legislation is that it was curtailing free speech. It's not. There's no intent to stop people having different ideas, having different opinions and debating them robustly within our parliamentary system.
Absolutely. I think that's a fundamental division and distinction. Opinions are one thing, and they are very welcome, and they will be different, and there's going to be disagreement, and disagreement is good for democracy.
It is.
But using falsehoods and lies as the basis of facts is a complete different proposition.
Absolutely. And I think some of the research that you're doing at the moment and the centre is doing and pulling together is going to be critical. This is a right here, right now immediacy that we have to start tackling. And so I think the work that you're doing is going to be really, really important in that.
No, thank you. Yeah, we're trying to understand the effects, in particular, disinformation in elections and the consequences to democracy. So absolutely, I think having academia and government work together in this in tandem is going to be fundamental in the next few years. Civics education. I know that's another of your passions.
It is, yes.
How are we faring in Australia?
Really badly. There's a report done every couple of years. The most recent one that came out last year tells us that students in Year 6 have got 43% proficiency. That's less than half. And it's gone down by about 10 percentage points since the preceding report. And then when we move to Year 10s, it's even worse. It's in the 20s. And again, it's 28% and it's gone down from 38% in the preceding report. This tells us that whatever it is we're doing out there, it's not working. And the problem is, and like you say, I'm very passionate about this. I think the most important thing we can do when we're talking about civics is get our young people across exactly how our society works, how our governance works, so that they then know how they can influence it and how they can engage in it appropriately. If they're not understanding that, if they're not being taught what the structures are, what their rights are, and how that works, then how can they possibly engage in it appropriately? Also, if they don't know how to vote, that's very difficult. I know you were telling me earlier about some of those challenges with informal voting. Sometimes we think that that's because people are just throwing away their vote because they're disinterested, whereas the reality might be quite different.
Yeah, we found that essentially 60% of informal votes in Victoria over the past two elections that they held, so the local election in 2020 and the state election in 2022, were essentially mistakes. So it's someone who wanted to cast a formal vote and was unable to complete the ballot. So the conclusion that we come from that is, if we are serious about civics, we need to at least teach people how to complete the ballot as a bare minimum type of baseline, right? Then we can build from there in all sorts of other things that we should. Now, you know that South Australia has a very interesting project on that. You know, they're called the Saving Democracy Project. We are in conversation with the Department of Education, assisting them as we can to make it better and more effective. Are there any plans at the federal level to do anything like this, or should we be talking about something like this?
So we have a joint standing committee on electoral matters, which I've been a member of in this term that's just come to an end. And we did a major project into civics education, which was fascinating. We had such great engagement from young people actually coming to tell us what they thought their experience is. They totally were behind those numbers that I talked about before. They're like, they don't get the education, they don't remember being taught any of these things, but they also get the deep and abiding importance of it for them to be able to engage in their society and be able to influence their society. We did this. It has a series of recommendations. The report only came out just before the term came to an end, so it'll be down to next term for us to see what we can progress in terms of getting those recommendations locked and loaded. But a number of them follow a similar pattern to what South Australia has already announced in terms of mandating some of that civics education at various points in the school system. One of the things that really stuck with me, apart from the fact that the young people who came were so engaged and keen, was the fact that teachers were really anxious about it. Teachers don't feel comfortable teaching this subject, and they don't feel that they're appropriately prepared or they have the tool. Is about being well prepared and having appropriate teacher education. But I think another part of that is an anxiety they have that they won't be able to manage the students in the room if they start to have an overt political debate. So we need to find ways. We need to find strategies to get around that. We need to be able to support our teachers so that they can appropriately do that and have the resources in place. There is a parliamentary education office, and I sit on their advisory committee as well. They can be so helpful to teachers in terms of the materials, but managing those sort of testy conversations is something that teachers are concerned about.
Absolutely. And, teaching kids to have a healthy political debate is very, very important, because otherwise, no matter what we do today, when they grow up, things will look very different. And so teaching them in the classroom to start having a even heated conversation, but respectfully, right?
Yeah.
is absolutely one of the most important things we can teach a child, in my opinion, at least.
The Senate is full of robust, respectful debate. And I think, there are some people who don't respect that, but there are a significant number of people who do. The Senate is an interesting creature. There is no majority in the Senate, so everything has to be done by negotiation, which is great and hard work sometimes. But building those standards of respect and those standards of behaviour that just kind of go, no, that's a hard no. You cannot do that. You cannot be offensive. You cannot be aggressive in that manner. You cannot do these various things. But yet you can absolutely robustly put forward your argument and robustly defend it. And I think that's important so that our young people coming up understand where those lines are, because it's easy to just hurl mud at each other, it's much more difficult to actually argue a point and argue a point to the place where you win the debate or, you actually convince somebody that maybe you're right and maybe they could move a little on their argument, which is essentially a lot of what we do in the Senate is we try and bring the various parties closer together so that we can actually get an agreement and pass legislation.
Absolutely. Of course, there's an election coming up in just a few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't know? And everyone is talking about cost of living. What is your take on what's happening, today, and how important is cost of living going to be in the upcoming election?
I think it's going to be critical. People are feeling it. There's a range of reasons. We've come out of COVID. The world's changed a bit. There's a lot of conflict in the world. Some of that conflict has impacted on the cost of items coming into this country. Some of that conflict has impacted on our energy prices. There's a lot going on in that sort of geopolitical space. And following the most recent American election, there's a lot of uncertainty. So uncertainty causes the markets to be unstable or cautious or, so there's a lot of things impacting. And one of the things we've done over the last couple of decades, governments of all flavours, not one or the other, blue shirt, red shirt, same, is in times of financial challenge, we give people money. We put money in their bank account and tell them to go and spend it. The reality of where we are now is that that's the last thing that we need because that will just shoot inflation back up again. We've worked very hard over the last 3 years to bring inflation down from over 6% to under 3%. So it's more than halved. We're kind of back on track. The economy is starting to turn the corner, but people are still feeling it in their pocket, in the shopping centre, paying their bills, and us standing there going, oh, throw this number up in the air, this number up in the air, inflation's this, blah, blah's that. That doesn't make any difference to people when they're trying to afford their groceries and they're trying to afford to feed their kids and pay the bills. It's really, really difficult. So what we've done is we've pulled the levers that we can pull. So in terms of boosting housing supply, because the only way we're going to bring down the cost of housing is to have more housing. The price goes up because of the competition. The rents go up because of the competition. The only way to bring that down is to build more houses. So we've got significant programs on foot. We've got 20,000 houses either being built or in the final stages of planning now, but the plan is for many, many more, and it's all laid out if anyone wants to look at the detail. And so trying to get those people who can into housing. So a lot of people say to me, I could afford the repayments because we've got so used to paying such high rent. We could afford a mortgage repayment, but I can't get into the market because I can't save the deposit.
Yeah.
So we have a scheme where the deposit only needs to be 5%. You get supported by the government, so it's not as risky as just going in with a small deposit, and those kind of things. And giving people rebates on energy, again, is about taking the heat off through an energy provider rather than into a bank account. It does make a difference. It makes a big difference to how our inflation tracks. And we have to make sure it stays down. We've seen one interest rate drop from the RBA, and it is, I think we're all hoping that that will continue and there'll be a few more this year. Obviously, that's up to the RBA. But there's a lot. And so with our approach to cost of living, it's then about reducing all of your medical costs, ensuring people can go to the doctor without having to see if they can afford to go, that they can actually just go and be bulk billed, that there's more support services there, that medicines are cheaper, that childcare is cheaper, that there's better standards of care in those areas. So that's where we're at. But it is difficult because nobody's loving going to the supermarket at the moment, and it's really, really tough on people. But it is our hope that as more things settle, as the finances around the world start to moderate, that it will take the pressure off. We've certainly seen a turn in our economy here in Australia, but we need to sustain that so that we can actually start to see those prices moderate.
Absolutely. It will be fascinating to see how these issues are going to play out and how we're going to make sure that, they're addressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
People are doing it tough.
Yes, they are. Senator, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
It was a pleasure.